The poll this week on Twitter was which return to professional wrestling was more important related to CM Punk, a bigger deal, if you will, the WWE return or the AEW return, and the majority of you put the WWE return. So this week we're going to talk WWE Survivor Series, and we're going to talk CM Punk. And obviously, those are the big stories coming out this weekend. I just want to say, though, and I want to say what similar to what I said, even without CM Punk coming through. CM Punk came out at the end of Survivor Series for just a few seconds, right? It was like literally a few seconds. He came out. It was a moment, right? I don't think that Survivor Series would have suffered without those 30 seconds of CM Punk. I don't think that the Allstate Arena in Chicago should have been any less filled without those 30 seconds of CM Punk. So the people out there saying that, ticket sales were being driven by the rumors of CM Punk and all that stuff, maybe so. But the fact of the matter is, Survivor Series stood on its own. And when the credit did come up and the show appeared to be over, I did not have anything negative to say. If you ask me to grade Survivor Series, A, B, C, or D, prior to Cult of Personality hitting, I would have graded the pay-per-view the same because of the wrestling in the ring and the stories that were told amongst the stuff that was announced.
What was your grade? I'm curious.
I mean, I'd give it an A. It was a good pay-per-view. And what Survivor Series has brought to us the last couple of years, right, is similar to what I say about the King of the Ring. And similar to say about anything to do with wrestling, right? Vince Russo always said titles are just props. In this sense, you got to agree with him, right? Because we didn't have championships decided. The main event was a tag team match. Things we see all the time on weekly television. And, the fact that King of the Ring went away in 2002 and has been brought back in some ways and hasn't really been that successful, and it was thought to be brought back this year, but it wasn't. My idea is it can be brought back, and the reason is because anything can be used if it's used correctly. Good storytelling and good wrestling is what makes a good show. And Survivor Series the last 2 years, right, has shown us that we can have the 5-on-5 main event matches, right? The 5-on-5 Raw vs. SmackDown matches, they weren't that good because the stories weren't there with them. Last year, we've had the 2 5-on-5 matches, and they were great. We had no world championships on the line, no Roman Reigns involved in Survivor Series, and it was a fine pay-per-view, a good pay-per-view, one that I wish that I went to, one that I would have flown to Chicago knowing the whole time that the world title wasn't going to change hands, knowing that there was just going to be winners and losers, right, that I was going to see same results as you do at a house show, right, but I would have been just as excited. Because that's what it's all about. So I graded it an A. It was a good show. Everything worked in its place. I will say the negatives that I do have on the show a little bit is that it seemed very rerunnish to last year's Survivor Series. And I'm just talking the fact that you're having the same Ozzy Osbourne song, the same set, the same, the same, logo, the same literal entrance video, but then also the card was structured the same, right? The show kicks off. It's a women's match. And while the main event featured a lot of people we didn't see in last year's, it was a whole different dynamic. The women's match was like a very similar dynamic, right? Damage Control was the main group in last year's bad guy team of women at Survivor Series. So that match seemed a lot like a retread and seemed like we were watching, a rerun per se. So those are kind of my negatives there. In Survivor Series. My question to you, what do you make of the last minute change, right, to Santos Escobar versus Dragon Lee instead of Carlito? Did you like that change? Or did you think that lessened that match? Because obviously Dragon Lee is not, Carlito in the sense of, what we saw Backlash. Like, oh God, Carlito's back. Dragon Lee is just another competitor.
So, for me, the match itself was pretty good. It didn't go more than, it only went like 7-8 minutes, so it wasn't that very long of a match. I felt like from an in-ring perspective, I think we got an upgrade because I think Santos Escobar he's in a groove. Dragon Lee's in a groove. Like they're both, they're peak. Nothing against Carlito, but Carlito's better days in the ring, I think, are in the past, during the rear mirror. So for me, that's, so it was an upgrade from an in-ring perspective from, maybe, having the eyeballs per se on the match. Yeah, I brought it down a little bit because of Carlito not being involved. But for me, I felt like, that match was good. I felt like could have been great if they let these dudes work a little bit more. Like I said, it was a sub 10-minute match. I felt like if it was a 10 to 12-minute match, you get another 4 or 5 minutes. I felt like there could have been some more magic. I felt like they were just getting into a groove, and then the match was over. So like for me, that was my disappointment with that match. So overall, I was okay with the substitution. I'm actually pretty high on Dragon Lee. I feel like he's the kind of guy that could be the next Rey Mysterio per se. I know that's putting a lot of weight on things because Rey Mysterio is who he is, but Dragon Lee is so much fun to watch. He looked great in defeat. Santos Escobar is a heel. This is freaking money. I'm pleased. I thought that match in particular overall was pretty good.
I mean, Survivor Series, I enjoyed it as a whole. I thought the main event was great. And, I didn't like it last year when there was the press conference and they asked Triple H, is War Games going to be a regular part of Survivor Series? And Triple H gave the appropriate answer, I think, and said, we're not going to make any decisions about every single year from here on out. We're not going to make decisions about anything like that, which is good. And I was glad that it was War Games this year. And I think if it's War Games next year, right, it should be a year-by-year basis. I think War Games should be a year-by-year basis. It should be as warranted, right? That's why Hell in a Cell pay-per-view doesn't work anymore, because it wasn't based on when they thought it was appropriate. It was based on, well, we're going to have it either way, right? I prefer that they let it happen more organically, see if something's worth it being War Games that year, and then have War Games. If not, then we don't do War Games. Maybe next year we take War Games off and we bring it back the following year. So I think they got to make sure to keep it organic. Don't keep anything exactly, this is what we're going to do at this pay-per-view every single year, because that's how things get ruined really quick. Of the War Games matches, which one did you, I guess, enjoy on the surface without the return and stuff like that? Just the matches themselves, the women's or the men's?
I mean, I would have to say the women's. I think the women's match is better. I think it was more. There was some really cool spots in there. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, there were some really cool returns. There was a really cool spot with someone who we haven't mentioned yet, with a cool spot on JD McDonough. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But overall, from start to finish, the matches both for about the same amount of time. They were plus 30, so they were over 30-minute matches. They were pretty close in length. But I thought, besides like the return of Randy and the return of CM Punk, I felt like the women's match was better. I thought Io Sky with the trash can spot, like, that was really cool. I just thought from that perspective, if I have to go one or the other, I felt like that was the better match. I felt like it was to me, it was more entertaining, I guess. And that doesn't mean the main event, which was the men's match, wasn't entertaining. It was. I just felt like the women's match was a little bit better, and honestly, having the returns kind of boosted up the men's match a little bit. Just to put it, I would say with the surprises, I would put it over the women's match. But if you took the surprises out of it and all that stuff, I think if you go apples to apples, match for match. Honestly, I think the beginning of the show with the women's match, they tore the house down.
So in the men's match, Randy Orton made his return, as was announced ahead of time. But obviously they played the thing where he didn't come out until later on in the match. He didn't come out with the team. And the reason I'm going to assume that happened, I'm going to say this is why this happened. I'm pretty believing that this is the factual case. I didn't read it. This isn't someone else telling me. This isn't what I'm hearing. This is just me taking an observation towards this. But Randy Orton making his return, I think, is better if his music hits and then 5 seconds later he's in the ring wrestling, right? I think what would have hurt Randy Orton, right, and that's why they did this element here, is if his music hit, he came out like CM Punk did, just to the front of the entranceway, and then he went inside of a cage and sat there for 40 minutes before he did anything, right? Imagine if Cody Rhodes' music hit last year at the Royal Rumble. At the beginning of the show, he waved to everybody and then just stood beside and then waited for the 30th spot for him to enter, right? It wouldn't make much sense. You come out when it's your time to perform. So with Randy Orton making that return, Sami Zayn, we didn't need that, right? Because we've seen him. We didn't need that with Cody Rhodes. But with Randy Orton, you don't want to see this great return. Everyone cheer him. And then he just, okay, now I'm going to stand here and then other people wrestle.
Here's the only thing, and I agree with that. I think they did it the right way because, like you said, his music hits. I hear voices in my head. You want his butt in the ring and you want him wrestling. Like that's the whole thing.
You want
So
the whole enchilada happening at once. Yeah.
yeah, the whole thing. Not it's almost like, all right, we're gonna go to a break here and wait for him to go in the ring. Like, no, we don't want to do that. The only other way that it could have worked, but I do agree that they did work it the right way by how they did it this past weekend. But the other way they could have done it is he could have been the fifth and final guy that comes out because they're all doing the entrance and everything. He goes out, his music hits, and I forgot who started the match for the Judgment Day. Was it JD?
It was Finn Balor.
Was it Finn? Okay, so
Yeah.
so what you do is, Randy's music hits, and everybody's deciding, they're getting themselves in the cage and all this stuff, and Randy comes out and says, kind of taps Cody on the shoulder, is like, I'm going in, and just starts walking to the ring, and the music continues to play. You get him in the ring. That could be another way to do it.
Started the match.
Yeah, he could have started the match. I mean, I'm not saying that's the way I would have done it, but if you want it from an aesthetic point, aesthetic purpose, then, from music to ring, that's the only other way you could do it. But if I had to pick, the obvious choice is they did it the exact way you're supposed to do it, and you pretty much called it in a different way. Like you were kind of hinting to that with the Hulk Hogan tweet that you put out this past week, where it's like he comes out a little bit later, which I know it didn't go out exactly as planned with the Hulk Hogan thing, but it did in a way where, and it made sense where I'm like, oh, dang, Jared was onto something with that, and then it happened. So kudos to you on that with the whole Money in the Bank briefcase, music hits. I'm like, all right, this is good. Now we get him in the ring. That one spot where he does that really sick RKO on JD McDonough. Great job to JD.
Your idea of him coming out first, though, is difficult because of the fact that it's his first match back, right? Is he want to go right out for 40 minutes? Because that's what you're doing. The first guy's in there for the whole time.
And that's
the issue with that.
And that's a fair point. That's a fair assessment. But knowing Randy the way he is, and by the way, looks like a freaking $1,000,000, by the way. He looks better than he did before he left. So I'm sure, obviously you could be in great shape, but it's just like anything. You could be in great shape, but if you're not in great whatever sport you're playing shape, it's a whole different ball game. But Randy Orton, I'm sure, has been hitting ropes, working with people. He's probably been in the Performance Center. I would assume or knowing Randy Orton, he's probably got a ring in his house, so he's probably been working out anyways. So like for me, like that part of it, I can see where you're coming from, but I think Randy Orton could have, if they needed him to, Randy Orton would have done it. But again, I'm not saying the way that they did it was wrong. I'm just saying the other way they could have done it from an aesthetic point was that way. But again, I'll reemphasize it. They did it the right way. I think the way they did it with the cash-in, where the cash-in was about to happen, his music hits, that was fantastic. Kudos to Triple H and company. Fantastic job. I just thought it was executed perfectly.
I will say, with the press conferences, I'm not a big fan of them, just because I'm used to growing up with the show ending and leaving you on that cliffhanger, right? And I think obviously Survivor Series had that perfect cliffhanger, right? Where it's just CM Punk comes out, Michael Cole doesn't even say much. I think he said the rumors are true, and there's just him there, that he doesn't get the mic, and the show goes off. And I think that's just I like that because, WrestleMania, right? I'm left with that image, WrestleMania 17 of Austin and McMahon shaking hands. And then you have to tune in. And the next time you hear a word from them or have an idea that you can, even begin to understand is 9 o'clock or whenever Raw starts, right? The next day on television. Yeah. So these press conferences kind of fill that balloon and then take the air out of them. They take that huge step forward and then they kind of sidestep. It's
but to your point though, and I agree with half of it, I guess. I'm glad
CM Punk wasn't a part, and I think CM Punk wasn't a part of that press conference, for part of that reason. I definitely would have been horrible if he was.
Yeah, I know. That's why I partially agree, because obviously the boneheaded move would have been, hey, CM Punk's here. Let's hear what he has to say. And it's not on a premium live event or on the flagship show, on Raw. Yeah. That would have been dropping the ball. The thing that I do like, and I did actually watch part of the press conference because I was intrigued, obviously, with the whole CM Punk, and I wanted to hear Triple H's thoughts on how they came to where they were, which was they agreed to terms. He shows up. I wanted to hear that stuff. That was pretty much the gist of it. But the rest of it, I agree with you. I would rather leave it as a cliffhanger, because I'll be honest with you, after that happened, I couldn't wait for Monday Night Raw to start, because I was so looking forward to seeing, okay, what's going to happen next with CM Punk?
Well, and see, like to your point there though with Triple H, right? See, that is part. And listen, if I was going to defend any part of any of these press conferences, it would mostly just be Triple H, because he gives out just the facts of the event itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not talking necessarily from a character perspective. I think like listening to like Gunther in the press conference took away a little bit because he started to get out of his character voice, right? And it kind of like he talked, like
It waters
like
it waters it down. It waters
yes,
it down.
yeah, it's director's commentary, right? When you're in the middle of watching a movie, you don't want to. Director's commentary is fine when I'm watching Jurassic Park, which I've seen 500 times, and it's a 20-year-old movie. But when I just watch something, when I just watched Jurassic Park, or I'm in the middle of watching Jurassic Park, I don't want to know how you did the trick yet. But with Triple H, kind of, you talk about that whole thing. See, again, it leaves. There's so much with CM Punk that or anybody really, that it takes me back to 2011, right? How a press conference would have ruined the ending of that, ruined a lot of things, because the whole, is he a part of the company? Is he under contract? Did he just leave with the WWE Championship at Money in the Bank? Is Vince McMahon, is this a real thing that just happened? Like those kind of like blurring the lines, kind of leaving you cliffhanger. Like CM Punk, does Triple H know he's here? Did he just kind of like invade WWE? Imagine a press conference after Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, like quote unquote invaded WCW. You know what I mean? Like it ruins that. And I understand we're maybe past those points, but there's still a few of those bare bones of professional wrestling that I still do like, those structural elements of wrestling. So I think the press conferences, I could do without them. Back in the day, I used to want press conferences. I used to think, that, it's like I want it like real sport. I want to have this big pre-show and this big post-show, and I'm fine with the pre-shows. Pre-shows are fine because they're all kayfabe, right? The pre-shows are 100% kayfabe. Everybody's talking about who's going to win, in war games, who has the advantage, not because of storylines or script. Well, I think this guy's going to win because his contract's up. None of that stuff. It's all about, if they were really getting in a fight kind of, talk. So the pre-shows are fine and they get you amped up, right? And they always have. But the post-shows, like I said, where they're kind of out of character, where they're asking real questions about the wrestling business, I could live without those things. I would prefer to not have those things, I guess. But my thing on CM Punk, he makes his return at Survivor Series. And listen, I'm going to stick with my point. Big fan of him back in the day. But 10 years have passed, right? I could give or take CM Punk, right? I'm excited to see him when he's there. It's a big moment for him to come back, right? Again, one of those never say never moments. Great. But now to me, it's all about what you do with him. I think it's even more important what you do with him than it is even like a Bray Wyatt. Because Bray Wyatt, I was excited to see because of his character being so unique and so different and what we knew he's going to bring and that character is going to bring to things. CM Punk is a regular person, right? He's not behind a mask. He's not like The Undertaker. He's a regular person, like a Seth Rollins, right? And it's all about what they're going to do with him and how they're going to make the stories with CM Punk compelling going forward. And, it's all going to be successful on that, how compelling they make it.
Here's the other thing, too. Like, and I'm in line with you. I'm in step with you with a few of those aspects where, it's been 10 years. We've seen him do the AEW thing, this and that and the other thing. And, obviously how he left AEW was kind of a black eye for not only the wrestling business, but more importantly for CM Punk. So for me, the thing I'm excited about and early returns, I know we were just not even a weekend, we're a few days in to the CM Punk in WWE 2023-2024 experiment part of this, where he seems like a different guy already. Like, just the way he looks different. Like to me,
he seemed like a different guy when he showed up to AEW too, right?
Well, here's the thing though. He looks younger than what he did in AEW. He looks like refreshed. And I know and there's reports that like he stayed after the shows. He signed a bunch of autographs until the building was pretty much empty. Like I feel like he's trying to rehab what happened in AEW as well. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen there from that perspective. Because at the end of the day, like I do feel like there may have been some screw ups in AEW, and obviously things in WWE in the past went the way that they did. But I genuinely want to see people succeed. I want to see them rehab, maybe the image of what people think of them, because I know a lot of people that are wrestling fans that were like, oh, great, he's back. I'm not one of those. Like I was, I incorrectly, you incorrectly said he went. We both thought, okay, he's not coming back to Survivor Series, and we both were surprised and we were both excited, and that's the truth because as wrestling fans, it's something that if you would have asked me 5 years ago, or in the early stages of us doing this show, I would have said, nah, never gonna happen. CM Punk, nah, and I don't care what anybody says. Yes, Ultimate Warrior came back, this and that. But the way the things went from a legal perspective with CM Punk and WWE, I just thought that was something that maybe would never happen. So it played out the way that it did, and I am excited I'm more excited for the business more than I am for myself because you mentioned it, you alluded to it, you mentioned the different matches that can happen. There's so many different things we could do right now. The obvious choice right now because of how Seth Rollins reacted. We saw all the videos on social media. We saw everything. The obvious choice at this point isn't it to go CM Punk and Seth Rollins for the championship? I mean, where are we going here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably
Pretty obvious.
a good spot. But I just my one worry, obviously, CM Punk comes back, he sells out the United Center, right? 23, 21, whatever thousand people in Chicago for a 1 hour taped show that was absolute nonsense just for the return of CM Punk. It reminded me of like those big fights, right? Where there's like Mayweather versus Pacquiao. It's a 4 hour card. There's 20,000 people there, and there's a bunch of nonsense to get to the thing we're all there for, right? Who cares if they're even boxing before the fight? If we're just here for that, right? And that's what CM Punk's return at United Center was, right? Didn't even need any kind of wrestling, right? But I remember how exciting that was. And then I, after a while, remember that CM Punk just became a part of the AEW roster, right? His allure was, his music's interesting. I'll say that his music is got that hook. He's got that song. You know what I mean? It having a regular mainstream rock song helps. You know what I mean? And being so synonymous and making sure that it stays with him wherever he goes is important. So it's cool, right? I went to AEW Dynamite. I've already seen CM Punk since his professional wrestling return.
Yeah.
But at the time that I had seen him, it'd been a few months, right? And it was cool to see him. And then after a while, he just assimilated into the roster, right? He got hurt and came back. And I just want people to remember that, he's going to just assimilate. He's going to be regular after a while. He's going to be, Seth Rollins. He's going to be Cody Rhodes even. I've seen Cody Rhodes like maybe even more than that times because since his return, he's hit every house show and every pay-per-view, even if he's not on them. You know what I mean?
We went together. We saw him in Buffalo, a few months back.
But he's at everything. He's at SmackDowns that he's not on. I mean, I went to SmackDown in London and he's on SmackDown doing the dark match because he's out there, right? He's on the house shows that are SmackDown exclusive. So Cody Rhodes is like, it's not a treat, let's say, to see him necessarily, and it's going to be a point where it's not a treat.
Yeah, he's making up for lost time, is what he's doing. That's what.
And it's going to be a point. We're going to get to a point where it's not a treat to see CM Punk, right? The point is, we want to see him in the same way that we see Seth Rollins, right? It's not a treat to see Seth Rollins, but we enjoy seeing Seth Rollins, and he brings something to the table. His presence isn't going to be enough. At Survivor Series, we got the shock and the awe and the face of CM Punk, and that's all we got. No words, just there he is, end of story. But we're gonna have to get to a point where we're seeing substance.
You hit on something there, and that just kind of fired something in my brain here. You always mention like the whole treat thing, or you don't see him all the time, kind of like how Roman Reigns is right now. You hit on that, and he's gonna slide back in with everybody else. Like he's gonna, I hate to say this phrase or anything, but fall in line essentially. But like Seth Rollins. Yes, we see Seth Rollins every week. He's always doing something. He's on our screens every single week. But every time you see him, it's an absolute pleasure to watch him because he's just so entertaining. He's so good. He does everything the right way. For me, I don't even care. Like with the whole shock and awe of CM Punk and WWE, that wears off. If he can maintain even some sort of level of like a Seth Rollins where he's putting on great matches, he's cutting great promos, and it's just a pleasure to see him, then I'm fine with it. Like it just needs to be at that point. Like the shock and awe, it wears off. You mentioned it. It's going to happen over time. But during that time, he's going to have to build himself up and prove to people like, hey, I've been gone. I went to AEW. I did this and that. But I can still go. I can still cut promos. and every time, I'm on a card, you're going to get something great. And that's all I want to see from CM Punk. It's like, just put on a good show, and that's it.
Do you think his promo on Monday Night Raw hurt a little bit in the fact, right, that he was so receptive and, like you said, he's changed? But what made CM Punk so popular and what made him so good is the anti-hero, right? The whole thing of, like, is he, aligned with authority? We need pushback. We need him to say things that they're going to say, we need to get rid of this guy. We need, and we've heard this whole thing about behavioral clauses now in his contract and rumors of that. But no, I want CM Punk to not necessarily be changed, right? Maybe be changed internally, right? But on the surface, we have to act like, I want the CM Punk who kind of acts like he doesn't want to be there.
Here's the thing. I think what you're going to get with him is he's, obviously with the, that reported behavioral clause that's been, been out there, all over the internet and everything. Like, for me, I don't even, I don't need him to be necessarily what he was when he did the whole pipe bomb thing. I think he's good enough in the ring. He's good enough on the microphone where if he, like, essentially, like, he toes the line where he almost crosses the line, or here's better yet, maybe this is all a ploy to sucker us all in. Like, oh, this is, wow, man, CM Punk, he's like the nice guy and all this and that. And then, like, when he's got you, like, he's, it's like baiting, it's like hooking the fish. Like, once he hooks the fish, then he goes back to being the CM Punk we all know. Maybe he kind
of did that with the promo, right? He said the promo to the crowd, but then at the end of the show, to the television audience only, he says, "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make money." So it's like very contradictive of pretty much what he just said.
I won't call it contradicting it because I feel like he's trying to create some sort of, I think he's trying to create mystery to his character because we just saw him. He just pulled up, at Survivor Series in his home city, didn't say anything, just, came out, kind of, almost like, hey, he just kind of waved to the crowd. Hey, I'm doing, talk to the crowd for a second, nothing's going on. It's just him showing up. And then Monday Night Raw, it's more of a promo to introduce himself back to the audience. Or there could be pockets of the audience that really don't know who CM Punk is. There are a lot of younger kids out there that maybe have never really been exposed that much to CM Punk. So it's almost like it's like an introduction to certain people. For me, I think having the mystery of the character, yes, he's a very controversial figure. I know a lot of wrestling fans that are not happy that he's there. At the end of the day, controversy, as Eric Bischoff would say, controversy creates cash.
I think one thing too, just about us getting older in general and how things are perceived, that's so different. And how, like, we talk about this all the time, like 80s wrestling and 90s wrestling and the Attitude Era and all these different things that are such short periods of time, and how much they all stuck out, and how the 80s look so different than the 90s, right? How 1989 WWF and 1999 WWF are like two completely different things. And it's just so strange, right? Because CM Punk comes back, and when we bring CM Punk in and he's there, he just seems like he's going to assimilate. He's going to be a part of the roster. And it just reminds me of, like, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan left in 1993 in WWF, and he returned in 2002, just under about 10 years since he left, right? I think he was gone for a shorter period of time than CM Punk was. And when Hulk Hogan left 1993 WWF as Hulkamania, and he came back in 2002, so much has changed, including his return felt so nostalgic. His return felt like his return would feel today. It would feel like, your childhood coming back. And it's just so strange in how we looked at Hulk Hogan making the return, and it seemed like if we saw Hulk Hogan in the ring today, how we would feel. But CM Punk's return after 10 years didn't feel like that. Didn't feel like, oh, an old man has come back for a nostalgia tour. It feels like a part of the roster that was a part of the roster before has come back. This doesn't feel like Michael Jordan coming back to the Bulls today and how it would be weird. It feels like Michael Jordan coming back to the Bulls in 96, 2 years after he left. Like, he's in the prime of his career. He was gone for a season. Let's get back to business, right? And that's how the CM Punk return feels, not how the Hulk Hogan return feels. So it's just weird. I don't know if it's just our age.
Well, I have to say, well done on the Chicago tie. That was pretty good with CM Punk and Michael Jordan. By the way, I don't think we're comparing the two as CM Punk, I don't think, is the GOAT of WWE or sports entertainment like Michael Jordan's the GOAT in the NBA. But the point is, two Chicago guys, I got to give you props. That was a nice little segue. But no, CM Punk, to me, he, he still has enough there. And like I said, he looks younger. Like I feel like he looks younger than he did in AEW. Like it almost looks like he looks refreshed. He looks like he feels like, like he said, he feels like he's back home. And here's the other thing that, people are talking about, because in that promo, he shouted out AJ, AJ Lee, his wife, which I got to ask you, since we're on the topic of CM Punk, and obviously AJ Lee, hasn't been in WWE in a long time.
I think
either.
she comes back. She has a spot at the Royal Rumble, but that's it. If you're going to ask,
you don't think she has a run?
I don't think that just because he's back that she'll necessarily be. I mean, because she's her own thing, and it's all depending. I think with the return of CM Punk, like I said, they could open up for. We know about the Women's Royal Rumble. We talk about all the time. There's so many spots. There's so many chances for gimmicks and just one-offs. So I think that's a possibility, right? CM Punk's going to be there that weekend. Why didn't she come by, see her husband, and just get in the ring? Same way we saw Michelle McCool, right? Undertaker's in town doing all those One Dead Man shows. I saw Michelle McCool that night before the Rumble, part of one of those One Dead Man shows. She's in town. She brought her boots. Get in the ring, do 20 seconds of wrestling, sure. But actually physically getting on the road, I mean, that would be, I think – I don't think related to CM Punk. Maybe it's related to CM Punk in the regards of that bridge is now open for the return because they're together, but it still has to be her own thing, her own run, her own reasons to do it.
She's only 36. I mean, in wrestling, that's peak right there. I mean, look at.
But it's got to be her own reasons to do it. She can't just say, "Well, I'm going to come back because my husband's back."
But
she's got to come back because
him returning to WWE. Maybe that sparks that fire in her again. That's what I'm wondering, because and that's to me, maybe she didn't have any interest in really doing AEW, because we didn't ever hear that she was going to be a part of the AEW roster. Like, I never heard anything. So I just found it interesting that as soon as he is back, CM Punk is back in WWE. We're starting to get the rumors, and then of course CM Punk doing what he does.
Going to go hand in hand, right? I guess you probably maybe had some rumors too that Bria Bella was going to join AEW and have another run when Bryan Danielson joined AEW, but that's not necessarily the route for her. So him being in AEW doesn't necessarily mean she's going to be in AEW, right? So I always everything in its place, every person individually.
And here's the thing, AJ Lee still, she still wrestles. Like, she still does, she does I think the WOW. I think she's a part of that, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So she's still doing stuff in the ring. So for me, it's like, she's 36, so she's still, in wrestling, in the wrestling business, that's peak age. We all know that. The late 30s, early 40s. It's like that's like peak for a wrestler. That's like usually when you hit your stride. There's obviously some people that hit their stride at a younger age, obviously, but generally speaking, like, look at Damian Priest. He's in the best run of his life, and he's in his 40s. So, like, wrestling at in the late 30s and early 40s is kind of that peak range. So for her, I could see her, maybe it was, like if CM Punk ever goes back to WWE, maybe she kicks tires on it, and I'd be down for it. I think she still has plenty to offer in WWE and as a talent. So, you might be right. Maybe she does that, that Michelle McCool thing and puts on a cool show for Royal Rumble, and then, all right, it's a one-off. I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before, and then that's it. But I think she makes a run, dude. I don't know. Like, I get this feeling she's young enough. It's not like she's past her prime. Like, she's still in her prime of her wrestling, of like where you are as a wrestler. And it's not like she hasn't wrestled. Like, not only has she wrestled and done stuff in WOW, but she's been on the show Heels. She's been wrestling in Heels as well. So there's a lot of work involved in that as well. So
not necessarily wrestling in heels as in high heels. Well, yeah.
No, yeah, the show Heels. Excuse me. The show
I know, I get you.
Yes, I mean, sorry, that's
she was pretty short, so maybe, that could be a new gimmick for her to, meet the height of people like Charlotte Flair. I will say, though, to your point about, people being older now in WWE, which also adds to that whole thing of that indoctrination of what we were taught when we were younger about, the whole billionaire Ted gimmicks, and how Vince McMahon, I guess it was just a jealousy component, the fact that he didn't have Macho Man and Hulk Hogan to create that whole thing of them being nostalgia acts, and we don't want them anyways because they're geriatric, right? And shows you that later on, we have a roster that is all in their 40s right now in the WWE, when he in 1995 was making fun of Hulk Hogan and Macho Man as being outdated and over the hill, and past their prime. So I think it was more a jealousy thing that he just didn't have them and wanted to throw jabs at them than he actually probably believed that they were not in their prime. But I will say, and that's probably also to the fact, you know what I mean? Like what I was talking about before, with if you put just a still shot of WWF television up next from 1993 up to 2003, you're just a still shot of like a match, just a picture is going to, the colors, the imagery, the definition, gonna look so different. But if you take a still shot from 2014 when CM Punk left and 2023, they're gonna look very identical. Obviously, there's a lot of differences, sure, but it's not a vastly different product. It's not a vastly, I mean, Raw is still 3 hours like it was. They still have the 2 shows. They still have pay-per-views. I mean, like 1993, we are yet to like have 12 pay-per-views a year. And the WrestleMania, was yet to be, we were yet to see TV 14 wrestling. We were yet to see all sorts of things. Stone Cold, the idea of Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't even conceivable in 1993. So the two ideas of CM Punk when he left versus when he returns, the 2 screenshots would be different, to be harder to differentiate the decade between them than it would be 93 to 2003. But the final thing, I guess, on this, I want to give kind of a pass a little bit to the harsh criticism I've given to the Allstate Arena and WWE, and I'll still say this much: WrestleManias and big time events, it's still difficult for me to grasp that WWE, if it wants to essentially grasp these markets and grasp the idea that it's a huge event, that it doesn't go for like the most well-known namesake in place, right? But following Survivor Series at the Allstate Arena, I will say that I've come to terms a little bit more on the WWE when they go to Chicago, going to the Allstate Arena and having that kind of relationship specifically with that arena, and it kind of becoming, maybe not a mecca arena in the world of arenas by any shot or any imagination, right? It is definitely not Madison Square Garden or, the Palestra in Philadelphia or Fenway Park in Boston or any of these places. But I will say in wrestling world, it has somewhat become that. I saw a picture recently that they have a mural at the Allstate Arena of WWE that they've painted inside as essentially saying, we don't have the Bulls and the Blackhawks as a tenant, but wrestling in WWE is a tenant of ours. This is
Cool.
like, quote unquote, their home.
It's cool. I think it's cool because WWE is obviously one of the most popular things in the world. So if Allstate Arena wants to attach itself to WWE, I'm fine with it.
And I like that, and that's why I've given it some credit. Like if WrestleMania goes to Chicago, I still have that hard time of being like, listen, you want to put yourself up there with the Super Bowl, maybe don't put yourself at the secondary arena, right? The NBA Finals, in New York City, if it's going to be on the campus of a college, right? Even if it's got a lot of history on that college campus, people are going to go, you got to go to the Garden. Come on now. Let's be real, right? You're the NBA Finals. You go off to Long Island somewhere. It's the same way that we used to always kind of laugh at like Impact Wrestling when they'd say, hey, we're coming to LA for our big show. Oh, you're going to LA? Where are you going? And they'd be like, we're going to the campus of Cal State Fullerton. You're like, okay, that's why you're not WWE, right? That's why you're not the NFL, right? We're not going to the event center, the volleyball court at Cal State Fullerton, right? Your biggest event is something that they don't even is pushed aside, right? I get that, but so I'll give WWE some credit though. They've made Allstate Arena. I don't know how they started the relationship essentially with Rosemont Horizon turned Allstate Arena, but they've made it their own, and they've made it so that it's justifiably a big time arena when WWE is in town and WWE goes there. And Triple H was talking about the acoustics of the building itself and how the sound resonates. So I'll give WWE some kudos that I can accept that it's become a wrestling WWE building, and then when Monday Night Raw or a pay-per-view is in Chicago, they're going to be at the Allstate Arena, and that's going to be cool because of their history with wrestling. And I said that to somebody years ago. I said, why don't they go to United Center? Why aren't they at the United Center for these big time events? 23,000 people can fit in that place. It's huge. It's in downtown. It's the big known building in Chicago. It's their eventually it's their place, right? It's up there with Wrigley and as their arena. And people said because wrestling there has such a tie at the Allstate Arena, and that's why it's more meaningful.
Yeah.
So I'll give it that. But if WWE ever has to go to Chicago and it's not going to Soldier Field outdoors in front of 50,000 people, it has to go to an arena, I would still say you got to go to United Center. You know what I mean? Because if you're going to shrink it down from what they are now, 70,000 people, 2 nights in a row to an arena, you got to at least go to the big time arena, right? And that's why Madison Square Garden always got that pass, right? WrestleMania 17, 18, and 19 were in stadiums, but WrestleMania 20 was at Madison Square Garden, and it got the pass to not be at a stadium at that time because of the significance, because it was Madison Square Garden, right? Because of the building. So it got that pass, right?
Yes.
So I'd give WrestleMania a pass if it went to Chicago, if it was at the United Center, because of the ability to hold more people and to have that significance. But I'm taken back in my criticism for WWE always going to the Allstate Arena.
Good. I'm glad you figured that out finally. I'm proud of you.